Hi y'all, thank you so much for being here tonight. I would like to start by just expressing my deep sense of gratitude for all of you being present. To me, I truly believe that when we're able to share our narratives, our stories, our hopes and our dreams, our pains, we're not just nurturing and healing our own sense of vision, we're actually growing, healing, and nurturing a collective one. So thank you all for being here. And I have my art on display, but I'm not going to read my artist statement. It's too long. I posted it over there as well as in the front with some business cards if you want to check out my website. Instead, I would like to dedicate my time here to my family and my deceased uncle. September was actually Suicide Prevention Month, and I think that in conversation, it's easy to box in a month dedicated to something, but it's an ongoing conversation we should continue to carry and live and continue to share. So with that said, this poem is dedicated to my deceased uncle who suffered with schizophrenia when we first immigrated here to the United States, and he committed suicide. I'm going to start with the poem. It's called Yellow Face on Bosa. Yellow face on Bosa, cold as stone, pale as white walls, blank as the sheets of paper that hold his history, Litsu Ga Yao, his history, his folk songs in the bound books of this so-called new country, blank as his identity to these here people who classify him as the yellow face on Bosa, shot in the head, brain and blood spewed everywhere over his new suit, blank as a humanitarian expression receiving his people from leaking boats from phenomenal planes, in the thousands after their cold thrusts and violent tearings of his ancestral lands, marked by and divided by bloodshed of conflict, but also of courageous resistance. Yellow face on Bosa means a goddamn nothing to America, the land of the plenty, of the free, of liberty, democracy, and the pursuit of happiness. But my God, like Chúa tôi, that yellow face on Bosa, that is my son, that is my brother, that is my uncle, and that was once my lover. Around 1995, years after we came here, transitioning here, this is an excerpt in my short story, The Night We Found Out About His News, and it's from the perspective of my mom. When the cops came knocking on my door that night, they said that someone had gotten shot in Young's car. My parents were at church, so they came to the second address on the record, which was mine. They saw the pale and panicked expressions on our faces. They did not know what to say. They did not say who it was. They did not say it was the driver. They were even sensitive enough to lie and said it was the passenger, asking to have someone come with them to identify the body first. We sent Sun. While Sun was gone, Hung and I sat reasoning it out. Chắc không phải là Dương mình đâu. I'm sure it can't be Young. It must have been one of his wild friends from the streets, and he must have ran away. I quickly said, turning to look directly into Hung's face to find an answer. He was quiet. A look of solemn concern had taken over his face. It can't be him. If a friend died in his car for whatever trouble they both got into, and Young ran away from the scene, then he's gonna be in deep crap. He should have stayed there, don't you think? I searched for another answer on his face, but his expression has not changed. He said calmly, "Let's wait and see. Để xem sao. I'm sure if he ran off, we can get a hold of him soon." Then the door clicked open and Sun walked in. "Ai vậy Sun? Who was it?" I stood up immediately and ran over to ask him. Sun closed the door slowly and stood still for a second. "Young chứ ai?" "What?" I wailed. "It's our Young." Young's body was found in his Honda Accord in the driver's seat, parked on Bosa and Bouchard Street near the mobile homes and the Asian Garden Mall we call Phước Lộc Thọ. He was parked in the middle of the street in the yellow pocket of the left turn lane. His emergency lights were on, blaring at passerbys in the entire Little Saigon district, blaring at the rest of America if they took a second to look. He had shot himself with a legally store-bought gun, even with his documents and sale receipts neatly stored in the glove compartment of his car. His nephew said he metalworked his own Saturday night special handguns in his isolated studio where he lived to shoot in Thun's backyard, doing jet li moves for fun, but he had chosen the legal one with proper documentation for authorities to find. Young had perfectly groomed his hair himself, had slicked back his shiny black hair, put on a nice polished shoes, and his new suit he had bought for Ha's wedding. Young shot himself behind the ear on the right, hugging onto a large statue of the Virgin Mary. It was a fatal and intentional kill, shooting straight through the brain, splattering it everywhere over his new suit and splattering it everywhere over his car, so that his brother's son would quietly clean it later, while his old mother rolled from corner to corner of the living room, wailing and hitting the ground in a tantrum of pain. She would finally crawl out of the car where son was solemnly working to frantically demand to see the remnants of blood and brain left of her son. Son would firmly step his foot on the piece of car mat to cover the stains of blood he knew his aged mother could not bear to see. She wailed and screamed and pushed and shoved in order to see the blood and brain, and had to be restrained by her old husband and children. Little did Young know that his 8-year-old niece ran out during the commotion, peeked in, and saw a spot of his splattered brain on the floor of the car that Son had missed. That was the last memory she had of her uncle. And little did Young know that his sister, Thuy, who was crying herself quietly in a dark corner of her room, when suddenly she saw her 70-year-old father walking in quietly, closed the door behind him, and fell to his knees, kneeling with his head on the carpet, both hands straight out, sobbing for 5 to 10 minutes. He then quickly and deliberately wiped his eyes, opened the door, and went out to continue to console his broken wife and to continue greeting the guests who had come to share in the sorrow. Young also did not know that moment of their father in pain. A suppressed kind of pain he buried so deep was the first and last time Thuy had ever seen their father cry, and she would never forget. It will come to save her life again and again, as she herself will someday struggle with schizophrenia and chronic depression, battling the thought of death every day. She wished she could have saved him too. Her dear brother, who had suffered so silently, sharing his dreams and pains only in a hidden diary they would later find with paranoid confessions and beautiful poems he said he would become famous for one day. Her dear brother, who was a wake-up call to a family, unaware and unsupported by society, to fully understand what he was going through to ever save him. Perhaps he had saved himself. Finally released himself in an explosion, the pain of a past finding escape from all the anguish of fighting to coexist in the present. There was a time when Thuy would be sweeping the cement floor of their home in the small village of Binh Ya, Vietnam. Young would come in from long hours of peeling corn to sell and ask her to check a big and sore pimple of pus on his behind. He knew she loved taking care of people and doing quirky little things like that, popping pimples, bandaging wounds, playing nurse. She might have inherited this liking from watching their father, whom she adored, who was an uncertified local village nurse, while giving people shots, bandaging their wounds. He knew how she tenderly cared for others' needs. So Young prepared himself and lay on a bench with his bare butt up in the air. Thuy went in to grab her handy little first aid kit she stored away for occasions like this. She asked, "Where is it?" "I don't see it." Young convinced her it's deep in the crack of his butt, so she could lean in just a little closer to observe, and he let out a large fart, blowing reeking wind in her face. She immediately slapped his behind hard and he pulled up his pants while bawling over laughing, devilishly gleeful that he had successfully tricked her. Thuy strutted off with her first aid kit, pretending to be mad but smiling quietly to herself. This was the Young she remembered to love. Or when she was nearly dying, a year after having her first child, sick and vomiting and having constant diarrhea for days, dehydrated and fainting closer and closer to death. The village priest had even come to anoint her with holy oil in case she did die, while fluids were being transfused into her shriveled, fragile body. She could feel her body turning cold on the stiff bed she thought was the end, but she held on to consciousness. In the corner of her eyes, she saw Young at the end of the room crying, uncontrollable tears streaming down, which he would immediately wipe away. More tears would stream out, and he quickly wiped them away. In that moment, close to death, she was able to see Young's love for her, honest and unrepressed. A moment like that made her believe she would die before him, not knowing that this image of Young was one of the most beautiful memories she would still have of him to this day. Now that he had gone before her, this remembering kept him alive and living in her world as she tells him they will meet again.